Unfortunately, if I load my graveyard here, it's going to probably load up in the section where you can't actually see it, so you'll have to remember it. But I believe there's a 3 Preordains, a Sea Beyond, a Flash Freeze, and a Burst Lightning in there. So here, with 1 counter on Ascension, I've got to find out the best way to not just wipe out his team, but let's see what I choose. I choose to Burst Lightning his Llanowar Elf, and then I think I might Call to Mind. Yeah, Call to Mind and copy it, targeting Flash Freeze and probably targeting another removal spell, although in retrospect, I don't think I like this play. This protects me from some of his larger, some of his more dangerous plays, like an Azuri, but it leaves me, if you can notice here, with no card drawing in my hand. Although actually, okay, look, it looks like I chose right. I chose Sea Beyond and Flash Freeze, and Sea Beyond over Preordain because it will result in much more cards in hand. Although that's something I need to test a little more. I don't know if Preordain would be a better choice to Call to Mind there. But with a Flash Freeze in hand and a Lightning Bolt in hand, this game looks pretty solidly in hand. Again, no pun intended. Okay. And tap. Draw another Flash Freeze, it looks like, and cast Sea Beyond and copying it. This is where the game starts. This is the snowball effect, the foot on the pedal effect that you see about Pyromancer Ascension every once in a while, where the whole game you kind of stabilize and filter and eventually get to the point where you have a Pyromancer Ascension in your hand and you are going to just completely crush. And there I cast a Foresee, I copied it, and before I could even continue, it looks like the game was over. Game 3 now, I'll be on the draw. I'm looking like I'm deciding on the number of negates, Jace Beleren, see if anything ends up getting swapped in. I recommend always being aware of your sideboarding strategies for when you're on the play and on the draw. Cards like Spell Pierce become much better if you're in a situation where you're going to have 1 available mana, or you for example, turn 1 against a Pyromancer Ascension deck, having that blue open for Spell Pierce makes it much more important on the draw, so they can't just sneak in a turn to Pyromancer Ascension underneath your mana leaks. So I'm left with a really strong hand here against his deck. However, it requires getting an island at the very least, or I guess island at best, or a mountain at the very least on the first couple of draws. Halimar Depths works as well, obviously, and actually is probably preferable to any of the other options. Here my choice is obvious, to simply play that mountain and pass a turn, hoping to again pseudo time walk my opponent by hitting his Jiraga Tree Speaker with a Burst Lightning as soon as he levels it up. And that card is just so hit or miss. When it's good, it is extremely good. When it is bad, it is extremely bad. But on my turn, it's pretty obvious again. I untap, play the Halimar Depths, seeing what looks like a Flash Freeze, a Sea Beyond, and a Scouting Tarn on top. It's important to remember with Fetch Lands and Halimar Depths that it's easy to bury a card with Halimar Depths that you want to draw, but then be stuck with a Fetch Land and forced to shuffle it away. Just something to keep in mind when you're playing this deck. It's one of the few interactions that this deck presents that very few other ones do, since Halimar Depths is not very widespreadly played very widespreadly. Is that even a word? My opponent decides to play an Elvish Archdruid, and on my turn, I untap, cast Sea Beyond. I'm looking to hit my land drops, filter through those cards that Halimar Depths showed me. You can see the Sea Beyond and the Flash Freeze there, and I go ahead and shuffle in what looks to be, I think it was a Call to Mind, back into my library. Go ahead and play my land for the turn and pass the turn. Now, it's not the greatest spot. He has an Elvish Archdruid in play, but it's a lot better than you would think, because I do have 2 Pyroclasms, and his Elvish Archdruid only has the single elf in play. It's just a 2/2 Llanowar elf at this point. That also makes his other dudes a little bigger. He decides to play out an Acidic Slime, which would be back-breaking if I didn't draw well. But it's obvious here he's going to target the Halimar Depths, try to cut me off of blue. Although little does he know, I'm going to be able to Pyroclasm away his entire team next turn, and I will be thrilled about that. I also draw Burst Lightning, which gives, I guess, a few other options. However, being able to take out a 2-for-1 with your Pyroclasm, that's basically what you're going for. If you can Pyroclasm a 2-for-1 or a 3-for-1 every single time, you're almost never going to lose those games. It's when you have to start Pyroclasming as a 1-for-1 or casting other spells like a Burst Lightning to take out a 3 toughness guy, things like that, where you're starting to run into trouble. Here he plays a Sylvan Ranger, goes ahead and gets a Forest, and let's see where he goes from there. If you notice, I have 3 lands in play, and I have no idea what the top card of the deck is in the library. So the next land drop is a little dicey, but that Sea Beyond is almost certainly going to get cast if I do not draw a land here. But he plays out a Fauna Shaman. That's a card that you almost can never let untap, because you never know when he's going to go get Vengevines or Acidic Slimes or anything of the sort. It turns all of those little Llanowar Elves and Arbor Elves and Draga Tree Speakers, turns them into potential threats. However, I haven't seen any Vengevines yet from this player. Okay, on his turn, he plays out an Elvish Archdruid, and the audio keeps cutting out, so I'm going to have to jump in here. It looks like I cast Sea Beyond, copy it, or not copy it, but put a counter on Pyromancer Ascension. Go ahead and draw 2 cards, Into the Royal and Halimar Depths, and probably shuffle back Into the Royal, because I am planning on clearing the board with the Pyroclasm anyway, and this deck doesn't have very many non-land permanents. Go ahead and play Halimar Depths, see an island, a Preordain, and I'm not sure what the 3rd card was. I couldn't see it on this screen, but it looked like it was blue. In hand right now, I still have a Foresee, a Pyroclasm, a Sea Beyond, and a Flash Freeze. And here's a slightly dicey spot, although he does just play Azuri, Renegade Leader, which in most situations would be killer here. However, with Pyroclasm going to be copied from Pyromancer Ascension because of Sea Beyond, if you'll notice, with 3 forests, he can only end up saving the Elvish Archdruid. So I'm going to end up untapping here, drawing 2 cards, shuffling 1 back in, and doubling a Pyroclasm, unless things change with the draw step. I go ahead and draw Preordain, which is actually good enough to change things a little bit, because that lets me set off Pyromancer Ascension for just 1 blue instead of 1 blue and 1 colorless with a Sea Beyond. Let's see what I choose to do. I scry away the Foresee, it looked like, keep the island, so that I can go ahead and Sea Beyond, copy it, and then Pyroclasm. I'll end up drawing a mass amount of cards here, and just like in the, I believe it was the 2nd game, this is the point of the game where the deck just seems to take over. Pyromancer Ascension gets online, and all of those mediocre cantrips, or even good cantrips like Preordain, or mediocre ones like Sea Beyond, become ridiculous when they're copied. For 1 blue, 1 colorless with Sea Beyond, you basically draw 2 cards, shuffle 1 of them back in, and then do it again, which is on the order of drawing... It's hard to say that it's drawing 4 cards for 1 blue, 1 colorless, but it ends up being very similar at this point in the game, because you can just shuffle away your extra lands, extra copies of counterspells, or removal, depending on the stage of the game you're at, and it just filters through your deck so well. So here I play the land and Pyroclasm, and I double it. And as expected, the opponent ends up using his Azuri to save his team. I don't know if there was a better way for him to play this. I can't imagine. You kind of have to go all out there with such a slow start on his part. But Pyroclasm, there's a lot of Pyros in this deck. Pyroclasm, the first one hits and does 2 damage to Azuri. The second one, him being a 2/3, unfortunately, instead of a 2/2, kills off the rest of his team. And Pyromancer Ascension is online against just a single Elvish Archdruid and a single card in hand. So let's see where the game goes from here. He untaps and plays a Leyline of Vitality. Looks like that was a sideboard option that I'm seeing a lot more often in green decks. It turns off Burst. And speaking of a Draga Tree Speaker, he goes ahead and plays one. And here's a spot where I'm excited to